Hello there folks, hope you're all keeping well. Now, I'm aware some of my fellow Scots might have horrible flashbacks with the content of this video, but I feel that a proper response is needed here to someone who used to be the head coach of the Scottish men's national rugby union team, and sometimes to seek truth you've got to go to painful places. The man I'm talking about is Matt Williams. He's an Australian who arrived to the Northern Hemisphere in 1999 when he was appointed backs coach of Leinster. After about a year, he was promoted to Leinster head coach. He guided Leinster to the Celtic Cup in December 2001 and then got them to the Heineken Cup semi-finals in the 2002-2003 season. That seemed a convincing enough CV for Ian McGeechan and Jim Telfer to convince the Scottish Rugby Union, the SRU, to offer him the job of Scotland national team head coach starting after the 2003 World Cup, which Matt Williams accepted. His appointment at the time was lauded by many. Roll on 17 months, and after 3 wins in 17 tests, won 6 Nations match won in 10 attempts, and in his first season we achieved our first wooden spoon since 1994 and our first whitewash since 1985. This saw Matt Williams and his coaching team sacked in April 2005. His time as Scotland head coach was marred by controversy on and off the field, which started with his vision of Fortress Scotland, where he aimed to have all players who represented the national team to be playing their club rugby in Scotland by the 2007 Rugby World Cup. That in the end became a failure. He also famously dropped Gregor Townsend at the age of 30 and told him he was no longer required under his regime. I remember him making statements at the time about how he thought the Scottish game wasn't good enough and basically told the media that our players weren't good enough and that it was going to take at least 2 Six Nations to get Scotland improving. And after those said 2 Six Nations, it seemed we had gone backwards. But this was over 15 years ago, so why am I speaking about this now? Well, Matt Williams has decided, instead of taking some responsibility for his dismal tenure as head coach, to point the finger at the standards of Scottish rugby at the time. In a recent interview with Irish broadcasting station Virgin Media Sport, he claimed that he bench pressed more than 5 of the backs we had at the time. He also talked about how he used chairs to do analysis drills on defending lineouts and talked about his struggles to get our players to a gym to train and that the SRU couldn't afford weights for them. Now, I'm not going to be in denial about the SRU's shortcomings, which they've had many since the game turned professional in 1995. And I know Matt Williams' appointment was less than a year after Budge Pountney retired from international rugby after criticising the way the SRU looked after the players. But I'm also going to call out bullshit where I see it. And this man, Matt Williams, is being Mr. Bullshit here. Firstly, his claim that there was no weight training facilities is inaccurate, as Murrayfield changing rooms have gym facilities in there, and they have been there since more or less Murrayfield was fully constructed. So he could have used them for the players to train if they didn't already on match days. I'm not entirely sure, so I think he's talking nonsense there. Secondly, when Matt Williams first took charge, he moved the training base to the Stirling University, using the training facilities there. And from what I've researched, the Stirling University facilities are very decent, and they were decent at the time. They've put in £20 million investment 15 years later or so now. To call it that he didn't have any facilities to train with and all that, again, I think he's just talking garbage there. The bit where he claimed to use chairs to do line-out drills. Now, I understand the technology back in 2003 to 2005 wasn't as advanced as it is nowadays, but at the same time, there's still a television in the home changing rooms at Murrayfield. I don't know why he couldn't use that. Not to mention, the players he was coaching defensive lineouts to were Scott Murray, Stuart Grimes, Jason White, Cammy Mather, Simon Taylor and Nathan Hines. These were all international players with 200 plus caps. Scott Murray won player of the 1999 Five Nations, I think, and he was a prolific lineout jumper for Scotland in his day. So to use chairs and make it out like that's how he's coaching defensive lineouts, you're thinking, really? And remember, this is a pack that also had Tom Smith and Gordon Bullock in it. He's also on record in 2007 of claiming that a big reason he didn't succeed as Scotland coach was because of racism, him being an Australian and the first non-Scottish person to coach the Scotland national team. I'm calling utter bullshit on this because after his reign of error as some put it at the time, we had Andy Robinson as head coach, we've had Vern Cotter as head coach, and both of them, had their bad days. Of course they did. They're coaching Scotland after all. They both had bad defeats, but on the whole, they both look like they had organisation. They both look like they put structure into the team. They both look like they could make the players want to play for them and really fight for that Scottish jersey. And even with Scott Johnson, I thought we looked like we had more of an idea of how we wanted to go about things than we did under Matt Williams. And that's saying something. I don't remember us ever looking as clueless or as toothless as we looked under Matt Williams. He came in after the 2003 World Cup and just made us so much worse. Our defensive structure was all over the place. Patterns of play didn't look like they existed, and when they did exist, we kept making errors. And let's not mention the missed tackle count. So maybe a reason we don't like you north of the British border, Matt, is because you simply weren't a very good coach for us. We Scots, we don't expect to be winning all the time, but we at least like to see a team that gives it their all, that is organised and is ready to take it to the opposition whenever they take the field. And I don't remember seeing that from Scotland all that much during your time in charge. Frank Hadden came in and picked up the pieces from your failings. The following Six Nations, he managed to get 3 wins out of 5, beating England, France at home, and managed to put in a respectable effort against the All Blacks in the autumn of 2005, where we put in a good performance that day, even though we lost. I know the Frank Hadden reign did turn sour after that first season, but even he, at least looked like he could put in an organisation for the team and actually get the players playing for him. You didn't seem to have that, Matt. In fact, of all the players who were still there during Ian McGeechan's era going into your era, I think Gordon Bullock aside, who still played pretty well under you, the rest of the players, you seem to get worse when you were a coach, Matt. So what does that tell you? I think you're talking rubbish. Of course, I understand there's money to be made from the stuff you talk about on Virgin Media Sport, and you're obviously a pundit for Irish television. Good luck to you there, and you seem to be surrounded by more Scottish-hating pundits, famously, of course, Ronan O'Gara and Shane Horgan. Ronan O'Gara in 2017, of course, saying that, I hope we hammer Scotland. They're a team that always talk themselves up, and I hope we absolutely thrash them. And I remember that day, even though our record in recent years against Ireland isn't great, I'll hold my hands up there. I remember that day being absolutely delighted when Scotland beat Ireland that day, and it was just a great night. I remember it so well. So yeah, that was fun. And Shane Horgan, he doesn't seem to like us much either. Never seems to have a good word to say about Scotland when I've listened to him. So keep going with your punditry on Irish television, Matt, but expect for us Scots to call you out on your bullshit. And with regards to your recent interview, I think you are mostly talking absolute bullshit. Of course, the players have to take some responsibility, as I said, but the buck stops with the head coach. It's also telling that questionnaire the players had to fill in at the time just before you left the Scotland job, where they were asked to give their opinions on how the season went, and there were some of them that were quite damning on how they got on with you and the rest of the coaching team at the time. Maybe a suggestion that your rapport with the players perhaps wasn't the best. Anyway, that's all I've got to say, guys. I really appreciate you for listening to this. Take care of yourselves, and I'll catch you later on.